Hello, New Zealand. I'm Bob McCoskrie. It is good to be back after a week off, mainly because Simon O'Connor is overseas and I was overseas as well. Pretty nice boss at Family First. Anyway, this is episode number 97. Tonight we discuss, should Charlie Kirk's killer receive the death penalty? Then we're going to get some interesting discussion on that, and even some words from Charlie Kirk with his view on it. Is it time to stop live streaming church services, which I think is quite a funny topic to discuss, given that we're live streaming right now? We'll discuss an article that argues that churches should stop live streaming. Stuart Nash, the ex-Labour cabinet minister, who's now on New Zealand First side, got cancelled for saying some dumb stuff. But Sam Stubbs didn't. And we're going to look, are there different rules, depending on whether you come from the left or the right? Are the local body elections for mayor and councils a big yawn fest? Have you even voted, and should we even care? And if we have time, we'll get the panellists' opinion on some advertisements they love and hate in magazines they do and don't read. We actually asked some of the panellists a couple of weeks ago. Let's meet our illustrious panel for tonight. Another sterling lot, top of the charts. Pick the absolute best ones. Firstly, down in the deep south, actually three of you are way south. That's interesting. We're totally lopsided. Firstly, in Christchurch, Dr. Michael Reid. How are you, Michael?
G'day, Bob, and good evening, everyone.
Okay, and have you shrunk since we started? Because your head's got lower on the screen. Has the gas in your chair dropped down or something? Anyway,
as long as my head doesn't get
is it south or west or north, Rangiora, Brendan?
North, Bob, North Canterbury, all the way, my friend.
Okay, closer to Auckland. I like that. But let's head south to the beautiful Queenstown. And Rodney, how are you?
Oh, it couldn't be better, but it's been a wet day. We've had some really wet days this spring. But there's still been snow. Remarkables are still open, and my kids went skiing on Saturday and had a ball.
Rub it in. Where there's no snow is definitely up north, where Mel Taylor is. Evening, Mel. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, let's get straight into it. Firstly, just video of the week. And while I was overseas, of course, that sad news came through that Dr. Vodi Bokum had passed away quite suddenly. We interviewed him for Family Matters a couple of months ago. He was in Auckland speaking at a conference, and we got to do a close-up and personal with him, met two of his boys that were with him. And sadly, he's graduated to heaven. We're stoked for him, but our hearts go out to the family, his wife, and I think is it 8 or 10 children. It was a big family. And interestingly, on their profile page, they were all wearing the All Blacks shirts. So they must have bought a whole lot of, or they were gifted, I think, from the host of the conference, a whole lot of All Black shirt. But I did, this video clip was doing the rounds just after he passed away, and I thought it was very applicable for us to watch.
You are going to hear a rumor one day that Vodi Bakum is no more. Don't you believe it? Don't you believe it? Don't you believe it? Because though I die, I will rise with Christ. It will not be the end of me, because Christ is raised, and I too will be raised with Christ. That is why he is called the firstborn from the dead. Folks, you don't talk about a firstborn unless there's others who are born after him. Don't you pity me. You pity the one who wants to hold on to Jesus without holding on to the resurrection. You pity the one who has absolutely no hope because they have no resurrected Christ.
Yeah, very applicable. Rest in peace, Vodi. Great man, great books. Get into some of his readings. Image of the week, probably a bit more down to back to earth, and some of what the culture's facing is there's a massive campaign against Netflix at the moment, basically because people have finally figured out that a whole lot of programs on Netflix is targeting real dodgy stuff, LGBT, trans, and people have only just picked that up. So there is a massive cancel Netflix campaign going on at the moment, and they have lost literally billions of dollars, my understanding, because of the campaign. Although it's not just in the culture that there's problems. Sadly, this is the new Archbishop of Canterbury, and the new leader of the Worldwide Anglican Church supports abortion, supports same-sex marriage, supports Black Lives Matter, and even blocked a black minister from being ordained because he wasn't willing to acknowledge inherent racism in the church, even though he's black and she's white. But anyway, so interesting times happening around the world. All right, team, I do want to get into a breaking story, and this is the one about Winston Peters' home being targeted by pro-Palestinian protesters. I thought they might be protesting that they want the release of the hostages in Israel, but no, they want the release of the 3 Kiwis that were sailing around the waters or something like that. Rodney, I want to start with you on this because you have been a politician amongst all of us, lucky you. Was your home ever targeted?
Only by the media. Never. A couple of times the media would stake you out for some or other reason, which is always difficult for family. No, never. And in fact, when I started as an MP, it was expected that an electorate MP would be in the phone book. And if you weren't in the phone book, it was a black mark, because it was like, don't you want your constituents to be able to ring you up? This is terrible, because what we know about these people is they're not there to protest. You protest at Parliament, you protest in Queen Street. When you go to someone's house, you're going there to intimidate them. You're going there to intimidate their family, to scare their children. And of course, what we've seen is broken windows. This is heading to violence. And so that same violence on the left that we've seen erupt in the United States of America is quickly coming here. You can see it in their language. You can see it in their actions. And of course, we're seeing it now at Mr. Peters' house, and I think it'll get worse.
Yep.
You've only got to listen to Chloe Swarbrick, if you can, for a minute or two. And she's unhinged in her rhetoric. And if you listen to her and believe her, then you would be prepared to attack Mr. Peters in his home. Because to listen to her is to conclude that Mr. Peters is supporting genocide and the death of little babies.
Well, let's do exactly what you said, Rodney.
There was another protest outside Winston Peters' home, we understand, last night. What have you made of that and some of the discourse from Mr. Peters around protests outside his home?
Look, New Zealanders are angry. New Zealanders are upset. Let's come back to the basic facts here. Israel has illegally abducted 3 New Zealanders among hundreds of civilians who were all acting legally. These people were merely trying to deliver food aid to other people who are currently being subjected to a genocide. What kind of world are we being asked to accept where, for some reason, Palestinians are the ones who are needing to immediately justify themselves, as opposed to, again, these sanctions being applied to Israel for its war crimes?
Yeah, okay, that's enough we can handle of that. Brendan, interestingly, there's not a single mention about those being held captive by Palestinians or Hamas, is there? It's just about these 3 Kiwis that went over.
Yeah, and I guess for me that's the frustrating thing, because I actually do think there are some valid critiques that can be made of Israel. But when you do this kind of stuff, I've got no time for that. And one of the things I find so frustrating is this has become a very polarized issue. It's like, if you're not with us, you're against us, you're the enemy. And I hate that. And it's just so destructive. You can't have a fruitful and productive conversation. And so and what we've got to see more of from that side is an actual acknowledgement that Hamas has actually perpetrated grave evil on October the 7th, and that holding hostages is evil. And I think that would go a long way, I think, to actually probably opening up people to being willing to have a listen to some of the valid concerns, I think, around what's going on in Gaza. But you can't do that while you're pretending that, that the taking of hostages and the barbarism of October the 7th doesn't mean anything.
Just back to the topic that we originally started off that segued into this should we ban people from protesting having freedom of speech outside people's personal homes?
What do I think, Bob?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I hear what Rodney's saying. I'm in sort of two minds about this. I think to me, it's all about context. What is the nature of the protest? If you're smashing windows, that's not protest. That's violence and intimidation. And there should absolutely be no tolerance for that. If you're being disruptive and destructive in what you're doing, no tolerance for that. But I think if someone is maintaining a peaceful, prayerful vigil type protest outside a politician's home because they're upset, I think, as long as their behaviour is morally sound and not criminal, then I actually don't have too much of a problem with that. But I can understand Rodney's point that that very easily that does cross a line where maybe you are there not for anything other than just to intimidate the person and their family who don't deserve to be targeted.
Yeah, there's a difference between a silent protest or vigil and a disturbing the peace, which I think is, I heard Luxon talking about that, the Prime Minister, and also Winston Peters saying that, neighbours were being woken up in the middle of the night. Mel, do you think we need to protect politicians' homes and sort of say that's a no-go zone?
Absolutely, I do. I think it's disgraceful, and I think it sort of brings out the left and the right, where I don't actually think you'd get conservatives or Christians finding where Chloe lives and going and doing these sorts of protests. They've just, from what I gather, they've just thrown something, or there's been glass breaking at Winston's house tonight. So there's been another attack tonight. And Chloe says in that video you just played, let's come back to the basics. Well, the basics are that people have a right to go home to their family, to their loved ones, and relax, chill, have some valuable family time. And that's not happening. They work, politicians work really hard. They do incredibly long hours. Whether you agree with them or not, they do. They work hard, and they should be allowed to go home. What if they're not home? What if the kids are there? What if the kids are by a window? It's just unacceptable.
Yep. Michael, do you think we need to protect homes? I mean, we complained about safe zones against abortion clinics. Is this just part of free speech? Free speech should be allowed.
Bob, look, I agree with the others. I think this totally crosses a line. Winston is representing the government. He's not standing as Foreign Affairs Minister representing his own family. And I think Mel is absolutely correct. You wouldn't see the right or conservatives behaving like this. This is the left's modus operandi. And let's remember, Bob, that Chloe was very quick to moralise about Benjamin Doyle being harassed. And this is just so wrong. Winston's family, or any other politician's family for that matter, I think it absolutely crosses a line. It's totally unacceptable. And I personally would be happy if this sort of behaviour was banned. I really would.
Yeah, I am trying to think of a conservative or a left-wing, like Labour, Greens, or even Te Pāti Māori MP that has had their home targeted. Can anybody think of one where a left-wing activist?
It's never happened. And of course, they have solid security around the Prime Minister's home.
Yeah.
But we've never had this, and that's only been a recent innovation. But that's usually not because of politics. That's because of, nutcases. But this is a very dark, very, very dark development. And we should see it for what it is. It's not an attack on Winston Peters or his ideas or the government's policies. It's actually an attack on all of us and an attack on our democracy.
Yeah.
Because this is a democratically elected government making decisions lawfully, doing its thing. If you disagree, well, you get a vote, you get a say, you can argue it in Parliament. But to have MPs who are in Parliament supporting people going around to MPs' houses to target and harass them and their families and their neighbours, that's an attack on all of us and the basic foundations of civil society and our democracy. That's what's going on here. We have a parliament where we debate the ideas. That's where they should be.
Okay, and I've actually got it just text from a very reliable source that it was actually a crowbar that was used at Winston's house. So it sort of takes it up a whole new level. It's not just a little smashing of glass. It was you know, an act of violence. Unfortunately, we saw Bomber Bradbury saying that people should spit in the food of National Act and New Zealand First MPs. And then I saw today Marama Davidson reposted a video of some wannabe politician in the Waikato, some lawyer, talking about punching David Seymour and Winston. So that political rhetoric, Brendan, it really, I mean, we thought it was just an American issue, but it seems to be around the traps in New Zealand, but the media won't fully identify it, will they?
No, well, I wrote a lengthy essay a couple of weeks ago about this very thing on my Substack, actually, about the question of political violence. And I think there's a game that people play that isn't helpful, and that's where they just look at raw statistics and say, well, let's count up how many perpetrators are from the right and how many perpetrators are from the left. And depending on how you play the statistical sleight of hand, you can come up with whatever answer really suits you. What I think is a more pertinent question right now is what ironically, the left call it stochastic terrorism. I call it incendiary and inflammatory rhetoric, where you are constantly using violent sounding rhetoric and very intense hyperbole that ramps up the stakes. You call people fascists. You constantly talk about colonizers and you call them racists, and you ratchet up the urgency of what's going on. And what that does is the more unhinged members of your base, they take that as a dog whistle, as a signal, the world is ending, I better save the world, and they go and do dumb, evil, violent things to people. And so that's a real problem on the left. And I think this is just not being talked about in New Zealand. Certainly the conversation's starting to happen in America, but sadly, it's a little too late.
All right, let's just check out the comments before we move on. Kirstine says, wasn't violence promoted by Bomber Bradbury? Actually, we just commented on that. Appears they have no argument, frustrations manifesting. Rainish says, it is not moral targeting someone's property and house. Daryl says, the man who provided funds behind the stage flotilla to Gaza is London-based jihadist activist Zahir Boudawi. He has known links to Hamas and has been photographed with Hamas leaders. Nancy Margaret says there was not a crumb of food on any of the boats. Apparently, I no longer can stomach listening to what Chloe says. Have you only just come to that point, Nancy Margaret? Justine says there was no aid on the flotilla. Brent rightly says, did anyone smash Benjamin Doyle's windows? Good question. They didn't. David McNichol says, come on, your home and family are off limits. Be respectful. And actually, in relation to that, Craig says, if they want to go protest, go to the Beehive and do it. Shirley said she lived just down the road from John Key's house while he was Prime Minister. They had security outside for a reason, I'm sure. Did you ever need security, Rodney?
No, thankfully. But Don
Different
Brash,
times, eh?
Yes, and Don Brash, as leader of the opposition, did when he gave his famous Orewa Rotary speech, and that was the first for the leader of the opposition. Of course, back in Muldoon's day, you could just go knock on his door. He was Prime Minister. Yep.
And Rodney, he would punch you on the nose if he didn't like you.
He did. If you were a protester, he would. He would run down the road. He would run down the road and punch you in the nose.
And his stubbies too, probably.
Yeah.
All right, let's calm down, guys. Let's just get one of the boring topics out of the way, because everyone thinks it is boring, and that is voting for mayor and local government. I am going to ask you if you have voted yet, and if you're interested. Apparently, interest in local body elections has declined from 56% back in 1989 down to just 42%. In fact, the last time our local government representatives were elected, our mayors and councillors, they were voted in by a minority, but it's still democracy. They suggest that maybe they can improve the turnout by us voting for both government and local body at the same time, which is interesting. But most people say that they just don't vote because they think that they're less important than general elections, and they're confused about the candidates and their policies. Just to show you the proof before I ask you guys whether you voted or not, this is the interest or the voter turnout, and you can see there 1989. So you've got mayoral and council. I mean, they should be basically the same. If you vote for the mayor, you should be voting for the council as well. But it's just popped down, little peak there in 2010. What happened in 2010, Rodney?
Don't know.
That's
Was
weird.
it the super city and people were more interested?
Yeah, was it that? When did the super city come in?
Oh, that's right. Yes, that was the first super city election.
Okay. Okay, so Mel, have you voted for your local mayor and your candidates? Have you sent your letter back, and were you very excited?
No, I haven't sent my letter back, but I will be. Am I excited? No, I don't actually find, just being honest.
Yeah.
And I was an executive with the Kaipara Citizens and Ratepayers Association for a little bit. And even work, that was all over the Mangawhai wastewater scheme debacle.
Yeah.
I was trying to ascertain why it is that the voting history is just going downhill. Sorry, from 1989. I think a lot of the older people are still interested and still vote. I think it's younger people that are tending to go, oh, I don't even know what this is about. All these laws and regulations, not interested. Social media, the stuff I've seen on social media is actually frightening. I've seen on a few community pages where someone has said, hey, I need some advice, I don't know who to vote for, which opens up this huge dialogue. And you get people, talk about misinformation, you get people going, don't vote for him. He hates Māoris, he's against co-governance. And then the person that asks the question is like, oh, thank you for letting me know. I know that I won't be voting that person. So they're not even, everyone's looking for a quick answer, I guess, or especially the younger people on social media, as opposed to actually going through what each person stands for. And billboards really, I don't know, I don't like billboards because a lot of them are like, oh no, I really like that one, fix the roads. But what else and what matters? And yeah, and interesting that it did rise when the super city was happening. It just shows that there was enough interest to boost it a little bit. I think we need to consider online voting. I think that's possibly the only way we'll capture our youth, although I know there's a whole, potential issues. But what else do you do when it's so low?
Okay, just this comment from Murray, who says, when Brendan Malone stands for Mayor of Waimakariri, I'll vote. Brendan, are you interested in local government, or is it a big snooze fest?
Well, we did vote, but I have to be honest with you, we had to go through and double check who these people were, half of them. It's interesting, our eldest daughter's now 18, she's eligible to vote, but just had no interest whatsoever. We're lucky to have, we're really blessed actually, we've got a good mayor, he's part of our parish, good man actually, and so we're pretty lucky in that regard. But I think part of the problem here is there is a massive problem with centralisation that's gone on. We've lost that sense of subsidiarity where the local matters, and there's not as much authority in the local, or it's certainly not as well respected as it should be. So people just lose interest, and I think that's a big problem. We've got to somehow figure out a way to get people actually focused on the local again, because that really does matter, and stop all of the centralisation, bureaucratic centralisation and control from Wellington. And I think on the question of getting young people to vote, to be honest with you, I'd be opposed to online voting. But I'm sort of the opinion that, look, if you've only got a minority who are voting, if they're invested in interest, they're the right people to be voting. It's rather than people who it's sort of a tick box exercise because it's just so easy for them. I think you should have to invest a little bit of at least your reasoning and time into voting, so you're actually thinking about what you're doing and you're not disengaging the brain.
Okay, Michael, are you excited?
Oh, Bob, I can't wait. So excited. Well, it is a lazy yawn, and I just want to share a little anecdote. My late father was a borough councillor back in the day, and the people that sat round that table, I think they got to wear a little chain, and they got $5 a meeting, and there was no chief executive, there was a town clerk, and all of these people lived in the area, and the mayor was a tradesman, the retailers, shopkeepers, and they'd all lived in the community a long time. So Brendan's point, I think, is a very valid one. It's boring. It's thoroughly boring. I actually feel sorry for candidates because they're critical of rate rises. But once even if they get elected, once they're in part of the machine, they will quickly realise, it's your point, Brendan, that really local government, and Rodney might disagree, I know he was intimately involved in this many years ago in the legislation around it, but it's really just an arm of central government now. high-minded people who get elected wanting to bring rates down, and then they realise how big the machine is, and that there's very limited local authority and local control. And there's profligate waste, Bob, in local government, in my view. The whole drag queen thing and all this sort of stuff, where people really do seriously want basic infrastructure. We don't want local government to be Hollywood stars. We just want people, a bit like in my father's day, there I go, I'm sounding nostalgic again, but people who live in the community, people who are committed to it, people who love the local community. It's a bit like Edmund Burke's little platoons of social order. And we've lost that. We have lost that. And water services, roads, footpaths, rubbish collection, the basic stuff. And I just feel sorry, Bob, for anyone who's actually brave enough to stick their hand up, because do they really know what they're getting into? And so my argument is that it's just really an arm of central government, and it's all the legislation. It just makes local autonomy and local control very, very difficult.
Just before you wrap it up, Rodney, Neil says, local government is indeed important. Ask any ratepayer. And another front in the culture wars, ask your local librarian. And Hartley says, I think in Taupo we're going to have a really good turnout. That's because Christine Rankin is running in Taupo, I think. So, she always brings fire to any election campaign. Rodney, you were the Minister for Local Government. Should we be concerned? Do you think any really serious stuff happens at that level, or is it all at central government?
Oh, no. There's a lot of serious issues happen at local government. The sad thing is they're not under the control of the people that we elect, and hence our lack of interest. And Michael and Brendan are 100% right. It'd be lovely to go back to borough councils and councils concentrating on their jobs. Unfortunately, we have piled responsibilities onto them. They're set in a legislative quagmire that they have to follow. When we did Auckland, I think I have the number wrong, but they had something like 187 things they had to do by legislation. They have a planning process that when you get elected, you're just locked in. You're locked into the previous decisions. And of course, they're the plaything, as Michael says, of central government. So it's terrible. We have these fat cat bureaucrats that run them, and they can easily manipulate a council, and the mayor's busy cutting ribbons and giving fine speeches, and his or her job is to get alongside the chief executive, so they're friends, and they just, manage the council because they control the flow of information. The mayor's happy to be seen to be the man, and the chief executive runs the place, and typically they're tyrants. They're total tyrants. And the staff are all tyrants. They're tyrannical over the ratepayers. They're tyrannical over anyone that's trying to, use their property. And they use every little festering sore to strengthen their position, such as Maori issues or environmental issues or water issues, just to strengthen their position. They're absolutely tyrannical. So they are extremely important, but it actually needs central government to clean it up. I got started. And then didn't get finished. And of course, like all things political, I sacked 2,000 managers, would you believe, out of Auckland? 2,000 went. No one noticed. But of course, no one looking. Quickly, there's 2,000 put back, probably 3,000. Because these people are out of control. It is like a deep state, but at the local level.
And the worst thing is they're trying to take away my weekly rubbish collection. So I'll vote for anybody that's not going to take away my weekly rubbish collection.
They won't give you the rubbish, but they'll give you the drag queen.
Exactly. And they won't drop the rates if they drop the collections either. All right, let's move on. I think this one's going to get a bit of discussion. This will be fun. Prosecutors have brought a murder charge against the man accused of assassinating Charlie Kirk. The prosecutor said the shooter wrote in one text that he'd spent more than a week planning the attack on Kirk. The question really is, should the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk receive the death penalty? Now, just before I come to you, someone alerted me to the fact that just 3 weeks before Charlie Kirk was assassinated, he actually spoke about the death penalty. And I just want to play a short excerpt of that before I come to the panel.
So it does say do not murder. It does not say do not kill. So those are two different Hebrew words, right? So to murder is a completely different thing than to kill. For example, you're allowed to kill in self-defense. Somebody comes into your house, you are allowed to take that life if your life is being put into jeopardy. In fact, to go a step further, the reason why it made sense to ancient Israel, did you know that a life for a life, otherwise known as the death penalty, is the only law that is in all 5 books of the Torah? It's the only law. Not even the Sabbath is in all 5 books of the Torah. Now, the Sabbath exists in Genesis, but it's not in all 5 books. So this idea of taking a life if you take a life, what is it rooted in? Why does it matter? Well, first of all, God is communicating to us the first thing. Taking human life is a major deal. That's God's first moral teaching in the Torah, that it's not to be trivialized. The only punishment imaginable for taking the thing that only we are made in the image of God. So if you take another image bearer's life, what could possibly be a just punishment for that? Well, according to the economy of God, it's that your life must also be taken. And according to scriptural theology, we are not taking that person's life. When you take another person's life, you already took your own life. I want you to think about that. If someone were to murder Alex or murder me, they already murdered themselves in that action. They already bestowed the punishment upon themselves. We are simply completing the task. It's not fair to the victims. You are cheapening the lives of the victims. You are basically saying the victims die and you get to live. So you get to continue to live even though you took the lives of others. In order to say that those people's lives mattered, the only just thing that we can reason ourselves to is to take that person's life. And that is not murder, that is killing, and it's societal self-defense.
Okay, well, that's one opinion, and I'm sure there's others on the panel. And Brendan, I'm sure you've got another opinion, so let's get some light and shade on all of this. Where do you come from?
Yeah, I oppose the death penalty. Like in principle, absolutely it is, and there's no problem at all with saying there is a sound Christian scriptural and moral theological tradition in favor of, in principle, the death penalty. For me, it's pretty straightforward in the sense, though, that can you achieve justice for Charlie Kirk and can you protect society from this perpetrator without using the death penalty? The answer is yes, you can. And so therefore, I think there's a question of proportionality and excess. Are we being excessive? I think we are showing something profoundly different in our actions as a society, perhaps, when we don't have recourse to killing, even though others commit murder and crime. I think also something to consider here is that the death penalty doesn't actually appear to work as a deterrent. The states in America that have the death penalty, most of them actually have higher violent crime rate than what those murder rates, than what those who don't. Generally, there are some exceptions, but it certainly doesn't appear to act as a deterrent in that regard. And the one last thing I'll say is that the principle in the Old Testament of an eye for an eye and a life for a life, etc., is actually a limiting principle. It's not a hard and fast rule in the way that I feel a little bit like Charlie was kind of getting that a little bit wrong there. And what I mean by that is that this is a way of, and the Christian understanding is that God here is saying to his people, the Jewish people, right, if someone steals your sheep, you can't kill them and their family. That would not be justice. So if someone steals a sheep, you get a sheep back. If someone kills, you get a life back in return. So it's a limiting principle. It's about limiting excess. And so I go back to that point. If we can achieve justice and protect society without killing people, then I think we should be able to do that. And I actually am in favour of not having the death penalty in that regard. And lastly, I'll say that there are a lot of problems still in America with people who are innocent. Sadly, some of them are, even recently after they've been executed, have been discovered to have been wrongly convicted. It's just not a particularly safe way of going about things, it seems, at the moment, certainly.
Okay, well, before I come to us non-theologian commoners, me, Mel and Rodney, Dr. Michael Reid, what's your opinion?
Oh, well, gosh, where do we start, Bob? Yeah, I think there's an old heresy called Marcionism that tries to draw a distinction between the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament. The God of the Old Testament, for Marcionists, is seen as sort of vengeful and angry and the God of the New Testament is sort of huggy and lovey. But that's not helpful at all, because we need to consider the whole counsel of Scripture, from Genesis to Revelation. I think the points Brendan made are very valid. Vengeance is mine, says the Lord. Taking a life for a life is totally understandable where there's clear-cut murder. And as you said, Brendan, there are many states in America that still do this. But I also think that point you made about a person who is executed, and it's subsequently found out that they were not guilty. If that's the case, and it has been the case, where is justice then? And the New Testament ethic is pretty clear that forgiveness is to be practiced. I think of Corrie ten Boom, who confronted the former SS guard who had been responsible for terrible crimes against her family. And, forgiveness is important. I think Charlie's wife has been incredibly brave and courageous and godly and right. But Bob, the other side of the coin is that civil society requires rules that honour life. And here is a person, if this is the person, and let's assume that it is, it looks pretty much like it is, that this person, you can argue, has forfeited their right to be a functioning member of civil society. Now, what is justice? Do we just lock them up? We can understand, can't we? Especially in an assassination, if there is a perpetrator and if they confess, not too many people would be losing sleep over a person's execution. But Bob, I think the New Testament is clear. I think Brendan is right. I wouldn't want to pull the trigger or pull the rope, because, as Charlie himself said, human life, we are the only aspects, or the only creatures in all the created order that are the divine image bearers. And taking life, there's Augustine's just war, of course. You have a right to defend yourself. There's all sorts of arguments in Christian history and thought, and we can, grapple with them all day. But for me, I think, we're not to be taking a life. But if this is the person that is convicted of this crime, and Utah is a state where capital punishment is still practiced, we could well see that this person is executed. So lots of issues there, Bob. But I think for me, Testament is pretty clear. Yeah.
So Mel, I know you've been struggling with this all day, and when we sent through this little clip from Charlie Kirk, it made you struggle even more. Where did you land?
It was challenging. It sort of got me to think outside the square. But no, I disagree with the death penalty. When it first happened, my first emotive thought was that, well, actually the murderer needs to be locked up in solitary 24/7 with Charlie Kirk playing through a speaker in the wall. That was my first. But I know people that have taken a life, and their past is just so traumatic. They have gone on to reach people that I think a lot of Christians couldn't reach. They've given their life to Jesus. They're on fire, and God's really using them. They've served whatever time, but now they're doing really incredible things. Also, with all the kids and all the kids that we cared for, and families, all the families that we saw. It's really hard when we've seen some monsters, youth monsters, and it's because of the environment they've grown up in. You're not talking about the obesity now and then, you're talking about an environment where they have seen, experienced, it's part of their daily life, everything from rape to violence to animal cruelty, like you name it, it's just horrific. And then suddenly they're adults. So I guess I look at a bigger picture. It's not like many sane people with good functioning families go out and murder people. Just food for thought.
Okay, Rodney?
Death penalty, absolutely. For the reasons Charlie Kirk outlined, I don't think it should be automatic if you murder someone that you get the death penalty. I think it's for extreme situations such as an assassination, a political assassination. I'm always a little shocked by people who suggest that we won't kill them, we'll torture them, such as Mel was saying, I know somewhat in jest. But to me, torture is more shocking in a way than just a straight execution. I think they do step outside of civil society when they take a life. I don't believe that we should have them on death row for years. I think it should be relatively quick again because I don't believe in torture. I don't think we do it with any pleasure or with any glee or any sense of retribution. It's something that you do with a great deal of regret because this is a person who has taken a life in the image of God. And we're killing someone who is in the image of God. So it's a tragedy all around. I don't think it should be electric chair. I don't think it should be a poison. I think it should be a hanging or a firing squad. Why? Because it's quick. And yes, I can forgive the man who killed Charlie Kirk, just like his widow did. Because I'm a Christian. But I can also see that justice is done.
Yep, I'm with you, Rodney. I'm for the death penalty because I think that it's because I'm pro-life that I'm for the death penalty, because I think if someone has stooped to the level of being willing to take other human lives, then for the sake of potential future victims, the state needs to intervene. So I would argue my personal understanding is that individually we cannot take a life, but the state should, in the same way that I can't incarcerate somebody, but the state should, which is why they run the prisons. I mean, I guess the question I would ask you, Brendan, is there a difference between the mosque shooter who killed, how many was it? Horrendous amount.
51.
51.
Yeah. Do we have a different opinion to the mosque shooter, 153 or however, of 151 versus this guy who just shot Charlie Kirk? One person. Is there levels that we take into account? Because if we can turn up, defend and be part of a just war, then where do we draw the line? I'm just interested to understand that.
So for me, it's, I go back to that point. Can you actually protect society? Because those are two key questions. Can you achieve justice for the mosque victims without killing Brandon Tarrant? Yes, you can. Can you protect society without killing him? Yes, you can. Then I think it's excessive. However, I totally get what you're saying, and Rodney's point about the state versus the individual, that's been the long-standing part of even the Christian moral tradition when exploring this. I mean, it's in the New Testament. There is a possibility for rulers to, I think the question is in practice at the moment. The reality is, and in response to your question, Bob, where do you draw the line versus, say, a just war? The question is here, if we are executing someone, like this question of can we protect society without having recourse to this? And the answer, I think, is yes, we can. So what that means is, because I'm not opposed in principle. So if society broke down tomorrow and we had no proper functioning justice system and we had no prison system, you couldn't just let a serial killer roam the countryside. No, you'd probably actually have to bring back the death penalty to protect society in that situation. The one other thing I think is worth considering, though, is I think from a Christian perspective, I think the ultimate good actually would be to see a person spend, even if it was life in prison, and contemplate the gravity of the evil they've committed and actually come to a genuine place of contrition before God and before society for what they've done and really come to loathe the evil they've committed. And I think time is required for that. So that's another factor I think that's worth considering.
Time for repentance, yep, sure.
Well,
But Michael, am I being a hypocrite by saying that I agree with the death penalty for someone who has murdered, like the mosque shooter or Charlie Kirk's murderer, and I support the death penalty for them because I am pro-life?
Bob, it seems a strange logic that you're saying protect life by taking it. But there's just so many facets and angles to this, isn't there? I mean, let's go back to Civil Society 101. The first and most important duty of the state is to protect its citizens.
Right.
Now, if that's from a foreign aggressor or from within, a madman with a gun or something, then the state is justified in taking measures for the greater good. It's a utilitarian argument, the greatest good of the greatest number. And let's remember, we live in a fallen world. We are marred, we are tarred with the Adamic brush, and we are sinful, wretched creatures, really. We're all guilty of offending against God because of our rebellion. But in a civil society, I can see absolutely the justification for the death penalty. And Bob, I hear you, and I hear what Rodney's saying. It's a vexed issue. I think you're right, Rodney. This should absolutely be a last measure. And as you rightly said, nobody wins with this. This is terrible all round. But Bob, what does it mean? Here's the sort of philosophical question. What does it mean to protect, for a civil society to protect its citizens? And you can answer that in lots of ways. That prolonged incarceration that you speak of, Brendan, or a swift and expedient death penalty that you talk of, Rodney. And as I say, Bob, I'll just come back to it. I wouldn't like to be the person who pulls the trigger. Even though with a firing squad, if there's 5 people, there's probably only 2 that actually have live bullets. So maybe that's to appease the conscience of 3 people that didn't actually kill the person.
Well, they do that with all forms. Even if you're pulling a switch, there is always a dummy switch, and 2 people pull, and so you don't know who's actually done it.
There's a practical problem too, because you think of Rudolf Hess, all alone in his prison. People spent their lives looking after him.
Yeah.
They're potentially prison officers that are going to have a career looking after Brenton Tarrant. Not a very fulfilling life, is it?
That's a lost shooter.
Sure, you get paid. You get your mortgage paid off, but every day you're going off there to do that. I suspect he would be costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million a year to keep. I think that's an injury on top of an insult, that someone has to spend their life, not just one person, dozens. He'll be in solitary. He'll be all on his own for his life. To what end?
Doesn't that show that we're better, though, Rodney, in a sense that we're actually saying we're not like him? We have a moral vision that is actually profoundly
I'm not at all
hard
like him.
and more challenging as a result.
I'm not at all like him.
No, I'm not saying you are. And
I'd happily execute him.
Yeah, okay.
But Brendan, I was interested in your comment that's saying that the death penalty doesn't necessarily deter criminal behaviour. That's the argument that the left use against prisons. But there's still an element of deterrent. The death penalty is a deterrent to further killings, isn't it?
No. Well, I mean, obviously the killer has already killed, so there's no deterrent to them killing. The question is, would they kill again? Well, if they're in prison, they can't kill again anyway.
But is it a deterrent to others in society?
No. Well, when you look at America, and as I said, the majority of states that have the death penalty, they don't have lower murder rates, which if it is a deterrent, it should actually look that way. So
is that the reason they have the death penalty, because they've got high murder rates?
Well, no, I think what I'm saying is it's a lot more complex that, and this is really what Mel's talking about. And I just think there's a really, because it seems to me at one point that we want the state to intervene, and we'll happily have the state taking lives, but where is the state when those lives are going off the rails? Where are they then to help them not go off the rails? So I think it's, that's what Mel's talking about,
Okay, so it's clearly from this panel that 2 are against the death penalty, and me and Rodney are correct, and we're for the death penalty. So Mel, you've got the deciding vote. No pressure.
No pressure. I just stick with my opinion, which is I'm against it.
Okay, let's move on.
Yeah,
I won't. That's good. Good discussion, though. Very important. And
Great
look,
convo.
it's a vexed issue. All right, we are live streaming tonight, and your comments are coming through. And interesting article in the Federalist, which talks about, is it time to stop live streaming church? And it says this. I just want to read this. It says, most who started to live stream found benefits beyond COVID germ busting. If someone can't make it to church, they can watch the recording online later in the week with a crunchy snack and a cat on their lap. Stay in their pajamas even. Those who move away from their home church can watch their old church friends from afar. They can stream a baptism on their phone. Those looking for a congregation can church shop from home. But if you can pause your church service to answer the phone and go to the fridge, you're just watching a show. Streaming is no longer keeping us connected. It removes us from the sacred and has become an excuse to avoid fellowship. Matthew 18 says, for where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with you. Church is more than passively watching a sermon and some worship songs from a distance. It requires participation. I won't ask if the church you goes to live stream, because that would be unfair, but I'm interested to know what your response is to the question that, look, we got through COVID. Is it time for us to encourage people to gather in person, or are there still advantages that people who may be away from church for the weekend because they're travelling but still want to connect can still watch it? Rodney, as the new church attendee, I'm fascinated to know what you think of this one.
Oh, yes, I've got a very strong view.
I bet.
When I became a Christian last year, I thought I wouldn't go to church because I thought I'm not into sort of sitting around and hearing people talk, and I'd rather read or listen to someone on a podcast. I'm not much of a singer. Going along to sing be a bit too much.
Mm-hmm.
I started to going to church and going to prayer meetings. They're now the highlight of my week. They're the best part of my week.
Mm.
And sometimes when I miss a service, my minister will kindly send me his speech, which I love. But it's a very pale imitation of being there.
Mm.
And the reason, of course, is the Holy Spirit. That when I go to church with believers, I feel so close to God. And I feel close to God with everyone there. And I hear God talking to me in worship. And I can't get that through a live stream.
Okay, good point. Mal, what do you reckon?
I think there's pros and cons. There's always a concern that people will go and find a live stream of a church that tickles their ears, where they're not challenged on anything. I think if there is a need to live stream, then there should be something going on. If say you're stuck at home, then there should be something going on at home, like a Bible study, people coming over, that sort of. There needs to be something else apart from sitting in front of a screen on your own. You need that fellowship. You need those Bible studies. You need to keep exploring. You need to be challenged. Although being a Christian at the moment is pretty darn challenging anyway. But you need those things. So I think it depends on the usage of it and what else is going on in your week and what else are you getting filled with.
I remember when we were doing campus life and Youth for Christ, or that, we always used to tell young people that, you know, being a Christian, going to church was important because it was like stoking the fire, that you were stoking the fire together, and the heat was helping you as a group to keep your faith alive. But as soon as you removed yourself from the fireplace, eventually that stick or that piece of wood would eventually burn out because it didn't have that combined burning power, which, Michael, as a minister of a church, I mean, you'd probably prefer people to show up in person, wouldn't you?
Oh, Bob, absolutely. And I'm going to make a theological point. We look at the nature and character of who God is. God is 3 persons, indivisible. And as one old Puritan said, God in himself is a sweet society.
Mm.
I like that. And as creatures made in the divine image, we are wired for connection and relationship. And you can't have fellowship peering into a TV screen or a computer. The whole point of the gathered ecclesia is that's what the church is. And we're social creatures. We're made in God's image. We're meant to be together. It's not always easy, of course. It's convenient to sit at home. I think during COVID, Bob, that was perhaps understandable. That was a bit of a quid pro quo. That's the best we could do at the time. But to get into that mode is just convenience over commitment, and you never have to be accountable. Good, proper worship is participation, and it's just lazy. I think if you're unwell, if you're confined, if you're infirm for a short time, then yeah, sure. But people who get into that mode and say, well, I'm going to church online. And of course, the people running the service, let's remember, they don't know who you are. They don't have any ongoing pastoral care and concern for you. So there's just a massive disconnect. So it's really important that we are the gathered people of God. We're worshipping together, and as Rodney's testified, really something wonderful of God happens there. The Spirit of God. We often talk, don't we, about the fellowship of the Holy Spirit. Well, what does that mean? Primarily, or you could argue, it starts with being together, and God is in our midst. And there's a lot of serendipity there that I've experienced both as a minister and as a church member for many years.
But I guess Michael, I guess what this article is getting at is it the church's responsibility to turn off the cameras and thereby encourage people to come, or do we just try and persuade people to come? I think what the author is trying to say, well, there was a twofold part to and you'll notice there that there's this image of the church recently, the Mormon church, that was set on fire and attacked. And so in the States, there's huge concern around churches and people being able to watch online and then getting radicalized and getting upset with what's being said. So if you're live streaming, people can come in and they can pick stuff out of, just watch John Campbell's latest documentary on churches and you'll see examples of that. So the question is, does the church need to take the lead and say, okay, we're turning off the cameras, be here in person?
Yeah, well, Bob, I think that's, every church is different. Look, we've got nothing to hide, and churches are public spaces, but we live in an age where there is such malice, and we need to be discerning. And so displaying everything on a live stream that happens in a service may not actually be wise, and it may be a real lack of discernment. I just think I'm in favour of people turning up and being present. As I've said, there are situations and circumstances where that's not possible or practicable, and so the TV is a very, very poor second choice in my view.
Okay, Brendan.
I think 3 points. I think, and I ran the live streaming in our church when we were under the COVID time. It's not reminisce about that. It is a very poor second. It's not even second rate. It's probably fourth or fifth rate substitute. There's 3 things for me. Number one is, Michael's point. Descartes' wrong. We are not disembodied entities. Our bodies matter. We are incarnated souls. We actually have a body and soul, a unified whole of both. And so we should be bodily present with others as much as possible. We're made for community. You can't do that virtually. So that's important. Number 2 is we need to remember that it's not just about the people watching. It's about the congregation also being disconnected from the people who are not present. And it basically gives us an excuse to forget those who are perhaps on the margins. We should be visiting the sick. We should be going to them, not saying, just flick on the live stream and it's just the same thing. It's not. They need our presence as well. And the last thing I'd say, particularly for my denomination, has a very strong liturgical sacramental tradition, same with the Orthodox Church, for example. So if you're in a Christian denomination that has a strong liturgical component to your worship, the whole notion of actually being present and offering your joining yourself with the sacrifice of Christ on the cross every Sunday, that's a fundamental part of it, and being present is essential to that. So there's certain sacramental realities that like I can't administer communion through a virtual screen.
No.
I just can't do that.
No. So would you be encouraging church leaders to turn off the cameras?
Absolutely. Just shut them off. I think there maybe are exceptions where maybe you might record some special event, the installation of a bishop or a new minister or something like that, for others to watch later, or something that's being streamed around the world. But they're the exception, I think. And I do feel concerned that there has become a normative thing now where we've basically some people who are on the margins are just being left on the margins. We've forgotten about them and they're not present with us.
Mm-hmm. All right. Does anybody want to add anything before we finish up? Because we have used up the whole hour and we didn't get through all the topics, but that's okay. We had some great discussion. Thank you for watching. Thursday night, Simon is still overseas and Peter Williams is going to be my guest panelist for Political Playback on Thursday night at 5:00. So we will look forward to that. And also, team, watch out Wednesday morning. We are releasing the 2 testimonies of Zara and Issy, the Kiwi detransitioners.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, that's going to have quite an impact as actual stories, real life stories, personal experiences of gender ideology and people coming out the other side, thankfully. So powerful stories, had an amazing impact at the conference, but they're coming out live on Wednesday. You've probably seen it on social media being advertised. So please pray for Issy and Zara as we lead into that. Anyway, Michael, Brendan, Rodney, Mel, great night tonight. Great discussion. That was awesome. And thank you for watching, team. We will be back next Monday night at the same time. Until then, have a great week.